Hi, and welcome to the third video in our PowerShell 7.2 for Intermediate Tutorial series. So in our first two videos, we really took a look at creating our own methods in our scripts, but there might be times where we actually want to use those methods in multiple scripts, or we know that we might use them again in the future, similarly to when we built the send email module in one of the previous videos that I released a couple months ago. Where we might use that in multiple scripts and we don't necessarily want to rewrite those methods all the time. This is where creating our own modules will come in handy. Now we've already seen how to import modules and how to find modules in the beginner series. So in this video, we're really going to be focusing on creating our module, creating the module manifest, and also being able to add the help information in our modules. So let's actually go ahead and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to create a folder, and that folder, we're going to name it the name of our module that we want to create. So I'm going to create a module called configurations. So here we have a folder called configurations, and then inside that folder, we're going to create another file here. And we're going to name that file again the same name that we want to name our module. So we're going to make it configurations. And we're going to do a .psm1. All right, so here we have our module file. So psm1 is a PowerShell module file. So the first thing that we want to do when we create our modules, of course, is load it up with different functions. So we've already seen how to create functions or methods. So let's go ahead and let's put in function here, get configuration, and then open and closing curly bracket. We're going to go ahead and put the commandlet binding, open and close parentheses, param, open and close parentheses. And we're just going to write out a very simple commandlet here. We're not going to make it a very extreme example here. So we're just going to make it write the output of get configuration function. And let's go ahead and let's just copy paste this function one more time here. So we're going to have a get configuration and we're going to have a set configuration. We're just going to change the output here. So we have our two functions. So we're just going to save. So again, we have our folder, we have our module file. So then what we actually want to do now that we have our module, we're just going to pretend that we have tons of parameters. We have tons of different functions. This module would be obviously fairly useless, but we've seen in the last video how we can make the methods, we can make functions, we can put in tons of parameters, make those parameters mandatory, and that would make these modules very, very useful. This module will be it's really just to set as an example. So let's go ahead and let's go back to another file here, or you can even do it directly in the console. But what we want to do next is actually not going to be inside the module. So what we need to do now that we have our module file and we have our module folder, what we need now as a best practice in that Microsoft recommends is to create a module manifest. This will tell PowerShell where to grab, what files to grab for the module, who created the module, the version information, and all sorts of different things. You can get really, really complex in this module. We're just going to be creating a very basic module. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a new -module manifest. And then here we're going to have to give it a path. So the path that we actually want to give is our configurations folder. So let's go ahead and let's copy this path here. And then what we actually want to add to it is actually a slash, and we're going to again put in the name of our module. So configurations.psd1, and that is a PowerShell data file. So it's really for the manifest itself. It'll tell PowerShell what to do with this module. And then the other options that we need to actually set up here is, well, we don't really need them, but they are very useful. So we actually have an offer parameter. So let's put the offer here as JackedProgrammer. And then we also have a description. So let's put in a description here. Let's say this is the configuration module. As you can see, there are tons of different options here. We could put in a module version, which is also another string. So let's just put 1.0.0. And then the last thing that we absolutely need is going to be the root module. And then we are going to put in our module file here. So this is going to be configurations.psm1. Be sure that there are no typos in here. If you put a typo in here and you try to import your module afterwards, you will get an error message saying that it cannot be imported. This has happened to me in the past. So once we have all of that done here, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to run this line. And what I'm actually going to do for you guys as well is I'm actually going to copy paste this line of code in the description of this video because I realize that it's a long line. There's a lot of options. You guys can definitely explore the other options to see what other variables you can set. But let's actually go take a look at the configurations.psd file. So here we have our offer name that we put in, JackedProgrammer. It tells us the date that it was generated on. We have our root module. We have our module version. It automatically creates a GUID for us. You can also give your own GUID. We have our offer once again here. We have our company name, which could be, we could actually put this in. We have it's a default copyright, but you can also supply your own. Here we have our description. You can actually set the minimum version as well. So you can set up a bunch of different values that are going to be in here. They definitely get quite long. You can go on for hours about creating modules. For the most part, if we're just creating a very simple module, just doing these exact steps that we're doing here should mostly satisfy what you would need. So once we have our PSD file, we have our PSM file inside of a folder with all the same name here. We are actually ready to import and use this module. So as we've seen in the last video, where we were looking at modules in the beginner series, we saw that if we do an env ps module path, we will actually see everywhere that PowerShell looks for modules. I also showed you guys how to actually just make this look a little bit nicer here. So if we do a dot split and we split it on the semicolon, we're going to get a list. So we can actually put our module in any one of these spots and PowerShell will automatically go look at it and automatically load it in for us if we need to. The other ways that we can load in a module is to give it the exact path. So let's actually just take a look and let's see the couple different ways that we can actually do this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do an import dash module. And actually just what I want to do before we actually import it here, let's do a get dash configuration. As you can see, it's not getting auto loaded. And if we try to run this, we say get configuration is not recognized as the name of a commandlet. So what we need to do is if we do an import module and we actually just copy the path of our folder that contains our module. So here we have our configurations folder. We actually import this here and we do a get configuration. As you can see, it loads in the function perfectly well here. So if we actually do a get module configurations, we will also see it here now because it is loaded into the session. And if we do a remove module configurations, we can actually remove it as well. So now if we try to get the module, nothing appears. And if we try to run the commandlet, it gives us an error. Now this is great if you don't necessarily want the module to always be imported or PowerShell to always look at it by default when it opens up. But let's say it is something that you want. You don't necessarily always want to write that import module and force it to look at a specific folder. What we can actually do here is if we go into our area where our configurations folder is with our PowerShell module, we can actually copy this. And if we go into our C program files, and then we can go in like Windows PowerShell modules, and we can actually paste it in here. All right, so once we actually have that in here, what we could actually do is we can actually do a import dash module configurations. And if we do that, we will see that it actually works, and we can do our get configuration. If we do our get module, we will see it again. If we remove the module and we do the get module, we can see that it's actually not loaded. But in this case, if we do the get configuration, it still works because it is in one of those paths that PowerShell always looks for. So if you try to put in a commandlet, it will actually go looking through all those different folders. It'll see that there's a module that has a commandlet called get configuration and will actually execute it, because now if we go back in here and we just delete this folder and we try to run this again, it still works because it's still loaded in. If we remove the module, now we don't have it anymore. And if we try to import the module with that name, we will actually say that the specified module configuration was not loaded because no valid module was found in any module directory. So if you want to be able to import it with just the name of the module, it does have to be in one of those folder locations of the module path. If not, you do have to specify the path of the module. So let's just go ahead and we are just going to use the path for the module here as our method. And let's see what else we can actually do. So once we have our import, so let's import the module again. And then what we could do is we could do a get command and then module configurations. And as you can see, we can see that we do have our get configuration and our set configuration. So if we go back into the module here, and let's just go and let's create a new function here. And we're going to call it new configuration. And we're going to save that here. Now, let's say if we actually reran this import module and our get command configurations, as you can see, we actually only still get configuration and set configuration. And that is because the import module won't actually re-import the module. It'll see that the module is already imported, even though it's actually changed since the last time. It will not overwrite that unless you close PowerShell and reopen it, unless you actually pass it a parameter of -force. Now, if we import the module and then we do a get command, there we have it. We have our new configuration. So if you ever make changes to a module and you go to re-import that module in a PowerShell session that was already running, make sure that you use the force commandlet, and that will make sure that it reloads the newest, most current version of that module. You're always going to want to make sure. I tend to actually do this in all my scripts. I'll always just add the -force. This way I know if I've made a change to the module, it will reload and re-import that change. So that is something that is very, very useful to know. So then what we might want to do, we know that we can get commands on modules, but what we've also seen is we could typically do a get help on a commandlet. So if we do a get help on get configuration, we will actually see here that it does not have a whole lot. We have none for name and none for remarks. And even if I do a -full here and we try to do a get help on it, we really don't get a whole lot. We get the name is get configuration. We get the syntax, get configuration. There's not a whole lot though. So if we actually want to provide useful information to our users that might be using this module, because maybe you're creating this module for your coworkers or you're a developer and you want to provide a module that interacts with VMware or something, you're going to post it on your GitHub. you're going to want to actually write some help. This way, if someone doesn't know how to use the commandlet, they can do a get help on it and they'll get some useful information. The way that we can add help information to our module is actually going to be, there are multiple ways. I'm going to be showing you one of the ways here, which is adding comments to the actual function itself. So what you would actually want to do is do an greater than or lesser than symbol, and then a pound sign. So here we have the greater than symbol and then a pound sign, or actually lesser than symbol and then a pound sign, and then it auto closes it with a pound sign and then a greater than symbol. So then what we want to do in here is we can actually do some dot notation. So here we can actually do a dot description, and then this is the description for the get configuration commandlet written by JackedProgrammer. And then what we can also do is do another dot here, and it'll tell you all the different sections that you can add. So what we can actually do is add an example here. We can say get dash configuration, and then you just go on a new line. This will return all configurations, let's say. And we can actually add another example. We can say get configuration. Now, of course, we don't have any parameters, but we're just going to pretend like we had a name parameter here. And we're going to put test. And let's say this will return configuration with the name of test. And then we can even add some other options, like we can add some inputs. We can add links, notes, outputs, the parameters. But let's put a link here, and let's just say this is a link to my GitHub and my website that has more help for this module. And all right, so let's just leave it at that. So as you can see, there are plenty of different options that you can configure here. So once again, if we don't re-import it, when you do a get help, you will not get that additional help. So you will have to do an import module -force again. But now if we do a get help on get configuration, we can already see related links. This is a link to my GitHub and my website that has more help for this module. We actually see our example 1, we see our description, we see our name. We should see another example. Oh, there it is. Our example 2. So we have our get configuration name test. This will return configuration with the name of test. You would be able to put like an example output of how it would look like. So again, you can add a ton of information to your modules that will make it very, very helpful. It could even be helpful to yourself to add these, as maybe you're creating the module and months later on you are still using it. Maybe you haven't used it in a few months and you forgot what one of the commandlets do. You could do a get help and you can write a very, very big, well-described description, write a synopsis, write some examples of how to use it. Maybe have a link. Maybe you have a GitHub that you've posted more information to. You'd be able to do all of that over here. Or maybe it uses like another module. Maybe it connects to like some sort of API that you could link to as well. This way you can get some extra information. But this is really the basics of creating a module. This will let you create methods or functions that are related to, I would always group my modules by like application or by like function, you can say. So if I'm creating a module and let's say it's like an Active Directory module, I would only have things that affect my Active Directory in that module. I wouldn't also have things that, control a SQL database in that same module. So I would definitely separate them. So I would have like, if I have a module that I wrote for SQL and interacting with SQL databases, that would be a module. one module for maybe my Active Directory, one module for sending emails and doing that type of work. So just make sure that you separate your modules. There are also other ways to separate modules, like maybe you want to have one module that will be for your technicians, one module for your engineers. The only thing about that is if they actually share functions or share methods, you'd have to update them at two places, which is why you would want mostly group them by thing that it affects. Um, that's would be my recommendation, and this is also like Microsoft's recommendation to also just keep your modules very, very specific. If it's for a module for VMware, have it be VMware module only, and then create another module for like Hyper-V. And this way, it's just more concise. It's just easier to know when you're importing, what it will affect. So those are just like some handy little tips. So hopefully this helps you guys create your own modules. So we still have a few more videos in this intermediate series. If you guys have any questions or comments, please let me know down below. Again, I will have that New-ModuleManifest commandlet in the description. This way you guys can copy paste that, because I know that that's kind of a long commandlet and has a lot of different options. So that will be in the description. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out, and I will see you guys on the next video.